Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco here from Macabre Daily, and I'm with someone who I believe needs very little introduction. I'm very excited to be joined by Barbara Crampton today, who I think most of our followers and viewers are going to recognize from films like Suitable Flesh, Jacob's Wife, and of course from Beyond and Re-Animator, which is what we're here to talk about today. So, Barbara, you are a prolific actor, producer, podcaster. You're doing all kinds of things. So it's so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
Well, I know you're probably getting pummeled with questions about Re-Animator, and I have good and bad news. Good news is more questions. Bad news, I hope they're not the same ones you've been getting. So we'll
Not,
see.
not everybody listens to all the questions, so it might be new to some other people if it's not new to me.
That's true. And I try to listen to other interviews you've done, so I hopefully don't do have too many duplicitous questions. But
Okay.
nevertheless, I think the first thing I'm always curious to know is, Reanimator is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. It's got an amazing new 4K release, which looks outstanding. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, what do you think explains the long-lasting appeal that the film has had?
Well, that's a really great question because, on the one hand, when the movie came out, it was kind of a hit, you know. Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert both touted it at the time. But it also feels like it's grown in popularity over the years. And so, why is that? Um, I do think that over the past number of years, there's been, a heartwarming feeling for 80s horror. And, that's part of its popularity is like looking back on what were some of the best 80s horror of the day. But also, I feel like the movie was really very full and very free. And also, it's the three F's: full, free, and frantic from the very beginning. And I think what made it as good as it is because we rehearsed that movie for 3 weeks before we started filming. So we really knew our characters and we were really tuned into the material and to one another. And it was almost like we were rehearsing a play because Stuart came from the theater and
Right.
all of us did actually. So I feel like there's an energy and a pulsation from the very first frame of the movie. And I don't know if we would have been able to achieve that had we not done as much work on the material before we started filming. So I want to say it has a little bit of that. And also because it's one of, people tell me it's one of the best 80s horror movies ever. And it was so different. And it just seemed like it was something that we hadn't seen before. And, when they talk about making movies, you want to have those 5 scenes that are unforgettable. I mean, we have that. We have the
And
cat
then
scene.
some.
Yeah, we have the cat scene. And then we have, Dr. Hill's head being cut off. And then we have my father being in the straitjacket, like when Dan Kane and Meg come in and they see him and then he bangs his head against the glass wall. That's unforgettable. And there's the scene with me that everybody talks about that's unforgettable. So I think we have that. I think there was a lot of happy accidents also in that movie that, there was magic involved. There was magic involved. So I don't know if it's one thing, it's the sum of many parts that made it so special.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we've come to appreciate talking with a lot of filmmakers and actors, producers, is that making a film is kind of like trying to craft a miracle, and that you have to have so many of these parts that come and work together in service of a greater whole. And you can't really manufacture that to the T. You have to kind of let some of that be a bit spontaneous.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I do want to give credit, of course, to Stuart Gordon. I mean, he was the captain of our ship and, the head of our film, and he was there 110% every day. And I also have told people before that, a regular movie day is like between 10 and 12 hours, but we filmed that movie for minimum 13 hours every day, 13, 14, 15, 16.
wow.
The last couple of days were 18-hour days because Stuart wouldn't stop filming and he wanted one more take and he was in your face at every moment because he's such an actor's director, talking to you about the scene and mining it for a little bit more gold at every moment. And we had so much footage and so much to choose from that, and a wonderful editor that I think that also really helped us achieve the full performances and the full weight of the material that the movie has.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it stands the test of time for folks like myself who grew up watching it and being like, this is their, maybe not my entryway, but kind of the journey of getting into horror ends up, you come across films like Re-Animator and like, there's something here that I'm never going to forget. Like you said, the five unforgettable scenes, but there's so much more. And I think from your perspective, it's obviously you have it as a hit when it starts off, and it kind of builds this cult following over time. But was there a specific moment where you realized, oh, wow, this is so much bigger than just a movie I starred in? This is actually more of a kind of a cult classic phenomenon that we have in front of us.
It was probably more of an awakening for the audiences and an awakening for me. I do remember being at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles when it first came out, and the crowd went wild for it. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, I've arrived. This is it. Then my career is off to a great start. And then telling my agents that the movie had such a great response at the theater, and doesn't this mean that things are going to be easy for me now? And they were like, no, it's kind of a low budget horror movie, so probably not. So I think that the horror fans are ahead of the curve and ahead of everybody else because they knew, but corporate Hollywood didn't really know at the time. And so that was an awakening for me. I knew that it was a great film and I knew that people loved it. But I think that the awakening for Hollywood and, moviegoers and and the people that make the deals have realized how horror is like the one of the most, or I wanted to say the most, but I hesitate to say that, genres out there because we are brave and we tell the stories that nobody else wants to tell and we go places that other people don't go. And you see over the past number of years how, you know, we were the ugly stepchild, horror was the ugly stepchild, but now more than ever, we're getting our due. And, you know, very big movie stars are now doing horror movies where they weren't before.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is it? Sinners just crossed $200 million, and it's one of the highest grossing original, films of in the past decade at least, maybe
It's
longer.
insane.
So,
Yes. And then you look at Demi Moore,
right,
Substance. And I don't think that's a movie she probably would have accepted 10 years ago, you
right.
know, with a director who'd only done one other movie. And, it's I think we're on the upswing and the sky's the limit.
Yes, I would agree. And I think it's a great, I mean, it almost feels redundant to say this every year, but it's a great time to be a horror fan.
Yeah.
And you do, you've spent a lot of time on the convention circuit and going to, screenings and things like that. I'm sure you've come across some really interesting memorabilia or merchandise. What's some of the most memorable pieces you've been asked to either sign or you've just been presented with?
Well, actually recently, it wasn't from Re-Animator, it was from Beyond. There was this little lipstick that somebody put in a little case, and it had a cardboard background, and it was from Beyond, and it was a picture of me going like this with my lipstick. Lipstick, okay, but it's a fake lipstick, so you can't even use it. But I guess you don't want to open it. You
Right.
just want me to sign it. So I've signed that. I've signed bobbleheads. I've signed myself in a like a little sculpture of me lying on the table, um,
Oh no.
medical table. Yes, there's a few of those out there. So the fans are very clever about coming up with their own stuff that they make, and then on the convention circuit, people do sort of bootleg things from the movie and make them. And I mean, I don't condone that because
Right.
it's a licensing issue, but at the same time, it's a few items and it's super fun. So, I enjoy seeing all the things that the fans bring to our tables.
Yeah, I mean the recent print that was released from Matt Ryan Tobin is an absolute stunner.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
s-
I actually commissioned that.
oh wow.
I commissioned that with Maddie Ryan Tobin because I love his work. And
Yes.
he's done another poster of Re-Animator a year before. And he does things for Lionsgate and Warner Brothers. And he's a very sought after artist. And I said, I really would like to commemorate the movie for the 40th in a way that we haven't seen anything before. And and of course, Jeffrey Combs is always front and center in the movie. His portrayal is so iconic, but I always have felt like Bruce Abbott didn't get his due as
Hmm.
Dan Kane. And so I said to Matt, I said, can we do something that's maybe highlighting Bruce, but also a little bit romantic about, the relationship that we have, and then with Herbert West like looming over us. So he came up with that idea for the poster. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend checking out my Instagram,
Yes.
whatever. If you go to a convention, I'm going to have them for sale at all the conventions that I'm doing over the next year. And the next one we have coming up is Texas Frightmare. So I brought a lot of them. There's a limited edition. So I have about 300 of the posters myself, and Maddie Tobin has, I think, 200. And once we sell those, they'll be gone.
Well, for folks that are heading to Texas Frightmare, make sure you stop by Barbara's table to get one because they look gorgeous. And of course, it's an opportunity for you to sign one as well, if folks want that. But I know that you kind of took a hiatus from the horror genre for a bit and reemerged with Adam Wingard's You're Next.
Mhm.
But you've also been very active in the producing community side for films like Jacob's Wife, Beyond the Gates, Suitable Flesh, some of which you've starred in even. Um, do you find what kind of draws you more to the production side of the house now versus, as much of the in front of camera things?
I think there's two things that a producer needs to have to hopefully be successful, and that is to have good taste and also to get people as excited as you are about a project. And I think I have good taste, and I'm very adept at getting people excited about films. And I'm very proud of the movies that I've produced. I'd like to do a lot more. And I have a few things in development and interest, but it's been a little bit of a slowdown in the business because of what's been going on in the economy, and also with the streamers and the strikes and things. So getting up and running again over the past couple of years has been a little bit difficult. But as far as producing, I really love working with filmmakers, young filmmakers, and helping them achieve their dream, and what the stories that they want to tell and what that means for them. And I love the development process. I just love working on scripts with people and collaboration and bringing a lot of people together to work on the same thing. It's like it's kind of like a freeing experience. I feel like when you're there's so much noise in the world, and so many things and so much bureaucracy in our daily lives, that when you're working on a film and everybody's poised and centered on this one thing of achieving the dream of making this one movie, and even though we're doing different jobs, the goal is the same, to just make this film as good as it can be. That's really thrilling and exciting and almost meditative in a way. Like you're just focused on one thing for at least a month of filming and pre-production, and a couple months before that, and then crafting the film and just getting it out into the world. It's just like, it's creating art. I just love it so much.
Yeah, you definitely experience a state of like almost flow when you're in this
Mhm.
really highly collaborative and focused environment. And it's obviously it's a blessing to so many young and aspiring filmmakers to have not just you appear in their film, but also helping to kind of shepherd the vision and the dream forward. So it's always lovely to hear that not just that you've seen success in genre work and broadly across, different facets of acting and production, but that you're now spreading that love and kind of helping others achieve similar outcomes. And you look back on your career, you have and have continued, you have had and continue to have a illustrious career appearing in I think it's well over 90 something films and television series at this point, not including your productions. What are some of the things you look back on as being your most proud moments?
Well, I always tell people the two films that are closest to my heart really are, of course, Re-Animator. So maybe there's three. Um, From Beyond, because it enabled me to have a character that had such uh, a large scope of emotions to play. And I really love Catherine McMichaels in From Beyond, and I really feel grateful to Stuart Gordon for giving me that character. And the other one is Jacob's Wife, because I feel like that movie came along at a time when, I had issues in my own marriage, as one does after being married for so many years. And how do you keep a marriage together when one person wants to change or do different things? And are you going to be able to bring your partner along with you? Or are you going to have to leave them or bite them and make them a vampire and, so that they'll do your bidding? I mean, how do you navigate a long-term relationship? And what does that mean? And so the elements of that movie, even though it was a horror movie and, we had some very grand, exciting, outrageous scenes happen, when you take all the horror away at its foundation, it's a story about a man and a woman, a long-term couple, and their struggles. And Larry Fessenden and I had gotten very close over the years, and Travis Stevens, who directed that, and I were talking about, well, who could play, Anne's husband, and Larry was on our short list, and there was a few other people, and we kept talking about it. We kept going back to Larry, and it was really a delight to work with him when we finally said, Larry, you should do it. And he really wanted to. And we shared stories about our own marriages. And, we had a lot of personal things to mine and to work on together. And so it's a real personal story for me.
Yeah. And it shines through. I think, you hit on a lot of good points that marriages do take work. Been with my wife for almost 10 years, and like,
Mhm.
it is something where you have ebbs and flows, and how that
Yeah.
shows up is going to change as you both as human beings do. And of course, the performance from Larry, who also has his fair time in front of the camera as well as behind it now with his Glass Eye Pix, distribution and production company. It's always nice to see genre favorites kind of working together.
Mhm.
And my last question for you, Barbara, is just kind of a fun one. If you were asked to program a double feature with Re-Animator, and they said you could pick whatever movie you want to
Mhm.
go with it, what movie do you think would
Mhm.
make a good companion?
I mean, I'd probably say Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, just because they're both like kind of over the top and fun and operatic. So I guess that would be my choice.
Oh, that will be either one of those would be a great double
Mhm.
feature. So sign me up for a ticket if that ever happens. But Barbara, I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time to speak today. Congratulations on all the success you've seen so far, not just with Reanimator, but all of the films and television productions you've been a part of, and continue to look forward to seeing you in not just films in front of the camera, but also the work you're doing with things like Shudder and Fangoria. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time and looking forward to speaking again.
Thanks so much.